because if it wasn't for Lamar Hunt, Philip Anschutz, and Robert Kraft, this league would not be here. You want to bring Lionel Messi in. It brings tremendous exposure to this league. But what happens when he leaves?
What's going on, folks? It is Scott Schertzen with Streampunk Soccer and Streampunk Entertainment. Alongside me, as often is the case, is Mr. Halen Haru from Five Borough Footy. And joining us today, former Yes Network play-by-play commentator, also works with Apple TV, and someone who is very, very, very well known, very well appreciated, very well respected by the NYCFC fan base, Mr. Joe Tolleson. Joe, how the heck are you, man?
I'm doing great. You?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking time with fan questions and some of the thoughts that we've got going on with NYCFC coming up to the rest of the season right now. We'll talk a little bit about the outlook on what's going on here, talk about transfer window, maybe a little bit, a couple fan questions on top of it. But I figure let's roll with it right now. The first half of the season's in the books. Do you have a grade for the team so far?
Probably like a lot of fans. No, I'd look at like, C plus if I want to be generous, B minus.
Mm-hmm.
But because there are certain games where, wow, I didn't expect that,
Hmm.
and other games where, wow, I didn't expect that.
Hmm.
The two Montreal games, for example, Montreal coming in, they don't have a win yet on the season. They come into New York and go away with a win. I think painting with a broad brush, the one thing that frustrates me a bit with the team is it seems they play to the level of their competition sometimes. And that Montreal game's a perfect example. They come in, and I think a lot of guys were like, "Oh, this is Montreal. They're not that good. Um, we just have to show up, and we're going to win the game." Well, say what you want about MLS. I do think, and we know the parity in the league, and there's some teams that were awful a year or 2 years ago that are playing really well now. Look at the turnaround Cincinnati had
Oh,
when they
yeah.
brought in Pat Noonan and Chris Albright, that kind of thing, where I don't think like some of the big leagues in Europe, and maybe the Premier League is one you can take out of it on most seasons. But, take Germany, for example. There's the bottom three, four teams in the Bundesliga that when they play a Bayern Munich, they hardly have a prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Where I don't think that's the case in MLS. I do think it's kind of the NFL adage, any given Sunday, and the same deal in MLS, that kind of any given day, any team can beat any other team if things go right. And I think that's what we saw a little bit with Montreal. They came out and knew how important it was to try and get a win, and they went ahead and got a win. You can't just show up and win in this league. You
Mm-hmm.
have to put in the effort week in, week out.
Yeah.
Halen, you got something, bud?
No, well, I mean, to your point about playing to the level of the competition, but when you consider those two results against Montreal, it makes me think of results like against Inter Miami in every competitive match that we've ever had against them, right? For some reason, the team seems to turn up and really compete against what has been one of the better teams in the league in the last 2 years. So yeah, I totally agree with you. It's for some reason we just kind of allow the other team to establish the pace of the dance a little bit.
Yeah, and the cynic in me on an Inter Miami kind of thing, how
Hmm.
much of that from an individual player?
Mm-hmm.
And there are guys, and we go back, Tati Castellanos, when he moved to
Yep.
Europe, he was like, this is what I've wanted to do. And it was great to see him a couple of weeks ago when he was at the game.
Yeah.
And more so to see what he has been doing in Serie A, joint leading goal scorer and that kind of thing. But for a lot of these players, and whether we like it or not, and part of it in the American sporting landscape, and it drives people in other countries bonkers, especially when it's sports that they play.
Hmm.
Basketball, when the NBA champion, they're the world champion. And people are like, no, they're not. The FIBA does a world championship, and these
Right.
guys didn't win that kind of thing. And it's like, I had a friend in Australia who's like, oh, the World Series, but somehow it's only teams from the US and Canada that qualify every year,
Yeah.
that kind of deal. But from an American sporting perspective, kind of our mindset is if it's a sports league in the US, that means it's the best in the world. The NFL, the NBA, the NHL, everybody wants to come here and play. And it's
Hmm.
not that for soccer,
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
and so you have to deal with that. So for some of these players too, how do they take the next step in their career? How do they perhaps go to a bigger club? And sometimes what you need to do is perform at the right moment. Take a look at World Cups. Look at players, James Rodriguez, for example, who had a great World Cup for Colombia. All of a sudden, everybody wants to, there's clubs going out and buying players based on what they did over 4 or 5 games in a midsummer tournament.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, you get into the grind of a 34, 38 game season, and it's like, what happened? What happened? This guy was great. Well, he was great in that system, and you've put him in here, and it's not working out, kind of thing. So sometimes all it is to take that next step in your career, perform at the right moment.
Hmm.
And are there
Hmm.
probably more people watching Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez and Inter Miami around the world, even officials at other clubs who might be looking for players? Let me see what these guys are doing, and does anybody else pop out? And I think you see that a lot. In that regard, I think it's tough for Inter Miami. Everybody is up to play them because all those players on the other team know this might be my chance to get seen by somebody.
100%.
Good point.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you look at right now, obviously the rumors have been running around for a while, speaking of Lionel Messi, that he might be gone from Miami after the season. Now, Halen and I were talking about this just prior. We think it's
Mhm.
very plausible that he might go back to Europe after the season. Do you have a thought on that? Or, do you, either way,
Just
Well,
to piggyback on that really quick, Joe.
yeah.
That came as a result of the announcement this morning with about Lorenzo Insigne and you said Federico Bernardeschi as
yeah,
well.
Yeah.
Bernadeschi's the other
Yeah.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah, is leaving Toronto, and it's got me a little concerned that one we're a league that can attract these guys, but for some reason we seem to be losing these guys like
Mm.
flies as well. I mean, Olivier
Well,
Giroud as well, right? So,
okay. Well, yeah. So let's. Messi has performed. You can't
mhm.
deny that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and there are people out there who you have Messi who comes in and does what he does. Is it because Messi is that good, or the league isn't as good as everybody thinks it is? And that's why a guy of his age can come in and perform at the level he performs. But some of the stuff he
Hmm.
does is just, I mean, I'm sorry, it's sheer individual effort.
Hmm.
To me,
Hmm.
free kick specialists,
Hmm.
and go look at the great ones, or David Beckham. Look at what Messi
Hmm.
does. Look at what Juninho did at Olympic Lyon years ago. I mean, you can go in different guys, but that's an individual effort. You can have
Yeah,
guys, Pirlo wasn't great when he was with New York City, and I think because MLS was the style of play in this league is completely wrong for the way Pirlo played, but he was dangerous every time he was over
especially
the
at that
top on a
age.
free kick.
Hmm.
Yeah.
He didn't score a bunch, but he was, it was like you had to be concerned about it. That's an
Hmm.
individual skill. So you have that, but he's also performed run of play and all that. But take a look at Olivier Giroud at LAFC. Look at what
Hmm.
Bernardeschi and Insigne have done at Toronto. Look at the amount of money those teams are spending. Are you
Hmm.
really getting return on investment for those
Hmm.
guys? And the
Hmm.
fact of the
Hmm.
matter is, that's the whole big balance. Now, with the designated players, you can kind of push that aside because I can spend whatever I want on that. I don't have to worry about the cap and all that. But the
Right.
problem this league has always had, in a way, when you look
Hmm.
at the Premier League, or you look at Italy, or you look at Germany, you look at France, that kind of thing, the top players are here and the bottom players are kind of here.
Hmm.
And you have that gap. MLS is like this.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
And it's been that way since day one. You have guys on the field who are making two, three, four, five. In the case of the Messis and Bernadette, those guys are making a ton of money.
Hmm.
But you're also putting them on the field with the guys making $85,000 a year.
Hmm.
Right.
Okay, so the challenge for administrators in this league is, how do I put a team together where I can fit into the salary cap, and the teams that do well are the teams that in essence have bought low and can now sell high because how that player has performed.
Hmm.
Go back to early days with this league, and one of the fan favorite players is a perfect example of the kind of guy you need if you're going to be successful, and that's Tommy McNamara.
Hmm.
Tommy
Mm.
McNamara contributed far above what he was getting in the payroll.
I think of Marky Delgado when you describe that type of a
Sure.
player.
Sure. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what you need. You need the guys who, we've got them in on this entry level contract, or a lower dollar value contract, and we're paying them, whether, I said 85,000 before, you can look at those minimums, but even the guys who are making maybe 150 or 200,000, but
yeah.
they
Right.
play like guys or better than guys who are getting paid 6, 7,
Hmm.
100,000 or a million. And that's going to be the difference in a championship team. How do I get the guys who were lower, to perform above expectation? But the other part for a lot of these teams, and this is where Toronto, I think, for a couple of seasons, was like, what do we do?
Right.
You can also get hamstrung if you have, because money's still money. And from a fan perspective, we don't always worry about it too much because you know what? We're not the one reaching in the back pocket, pulling out our wallet and shelling out the cash. But from an ownership perspective, the thing you really have to have happen is you have to, when you spend that money, you splash the cash on somebody, you have to have that guy perform up to expectation. And when they don't, at times it can be crippling because part of it is, yes, if I get Bernadeschi or Insigne or Olivier Giroud in LAFC or pick any other DP guys who have come in and maybe haven't performed up to level, there is that initial bump. Ooh, they have him. Ooh, they have Lampard,
Yeah.
Villa, and Andrea Pirlo. I'm going to go to a game. But if
Right.
you don't keep that level,
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
slowly people start dropping off. And
It
again,
concerned me a little bit.
dependent on gate. You need to get fannies through the turnstiles and into the seats because you're not getting all that money like the NFL or the NBA or something. The NFL doesn't have to sell a single ticket and they cover their payroll. That's not
Hmm.
the case in this league.
It did concern me a little bit to hear that because to your point, you're saying that how do these teams get 600 $700,000 contract level of play out of a guy that's making 100 or less, right?
Oh, sure.
Um, but
And
I
some of it
think
you get lucky. Some of it, you
some of
get
it you
lucky.
do get
Yeah.
lucky. It really is just like a bolt of lightning sometimes, right? Marco Delgado, Tommy McNair, these aren't guys who looked like they were the real deal coming
Right.
in, but they just had the right mentality.
Hmm.
But I think the reason why these guys end up leading the Lorenzo Insignes and the Bernadeschi's and the Olivier Giroud's is how the league handles these talents, right? Olivier Giroud going to a market like LAFC feels right. We all know Olivier Giroud and LAFC is a huge market, but the way, as far as I understand it, the way talent is dispersed around this league, it's not. It's meant to create parity, right? Is that fair to say?
Meant to, but does
It's
it often.
and
I mean, I think about it. When you hear the big names, Olivier Giroud,
yeah,
what real chance? And this is nothing against different cities. A part of it's reality, and part of
yeah,
it
yeah,
is the big cities in this country are what get talked about elsewhere around the world.
Hmm.
So
exactly.
you don't get a lot of talk, maybe around the world, about a St. Louis, about
Kansas
Minneapolis,
City.
St. Paul for Minnesota
Austin, yeah,
United.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Denver, some, but it's more about skiing.
Right.
Not about this. So a Kansas City to try and
Hmm.
bring those players in and sell them on that city. Where when you go
Hmm.
to Olivier Giroud or Suarez and go, do you want to go to Miami? You want to go to LA? It's Hollywood. You want to go to New York?
Yeah,
And it's like,
absolutely.
oh, okay. And some of it too for some players, I think, is let me go to a team in a city that it's easy for me to go home if I need to get home. We have a
Right.
4 days off and I want to fly home and see my family. It's not hard to
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
Um, as opposed to being in Vancouver and now I have to try and get to Italy.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Again, just as an example. So you have those situations, and that's why I say you'd like from a parity standpoint, you'd like there to be more of a mechanism and they say there is, but there always seems to be ways to work around it to where that player ends up where he wants to be. Um, but it was a true hard and fast system. You have an order, and whoever's next up in the order, if that guy's available, they can sign him. And part of it is then maybe the guy doesn't sign with the league, and that's the other question. 30 years in, that I still don't think we have a real answer. How much of how much does the league need that marquee player,
Hmm.
or does that marquee player still need the league? And with Giroud coming in, Messi, Suarez, they went for a bit where it was, oh, it's just a retirement league. These guys who are done and can't play in Europe anymore come here, um, and
Halen, I
then
think
they
you're
kind of
talking
got
about me.
away from that a little bit, and they've kind of come back. But back to the original question. I know we've kind of gone around in circles on this,
Perfect.
but about Messi potentially leaving. The big question I have with that, which I had from day one, you want to bring Lionel Messi in. It brings tremendous exposure to this league, and that's fantastic. But what happens when he leaves? How do you maintain any
Mhm.
momentum you gained with him being here after he is gone? Because, and it's not a very scientific thing. It's anecdotal at best. But look at what happened with Barcelona and PSG,
Mhm.
and more so
Yeah.
PSG. He leaves Barcelona, he goes to PSG, and PSG's social media numbers skyrocket. They go
Hmm.
from like
Yeah.
5 million people following PSG to, 15 or 20 million. And then Lionel Messi says, I'm leaving PSG and I'm going to Inter Miami. And they lost like 10 million followers
Hmm.
in 3 days or something. And
Hey.
think about that. And maybe I'm the outlier here. I don't think I have ever gone through my social media stuff and go, why do I follow them anymore?
Hmm.
For whatever
Right.
reason, I started following somebody, and now for whatever reason, I don't like what they say, or they don't, whatever the case may be,
Hmm.
I just skip by it. I don't
Hmm.
go and go, I'm not going to follow them anymore.
So
That's
you're saying it's a
that's an
deliberate
effort.
action? Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
effort, and that's the
Yeah.
dedication of a fan to go, you got rid of my guy, I'm done with
Hmm.
you. You have to make an
Hmm.
effort to go in and unfollow somebody.
It could be a
And that's
generational
what
thing
those
too.
fans did with PSG.
Hmm.
So does that same thing happen with MLS? A big bump. Oh, I want to follow MLS. I want to
Yeah.
follow.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you want to
Yeah.
follow MLS or do you want to follow Lionel Messi?
Hmm.
Right.
And what happens when
100%.
he's gone? How do you maintain that momentum? And I don't know if we've seen the answer to that yet.
I mean, the answer
It's
could be
it's
World
tough,
Cup
man.
next year, to be honest with you. I mean, the opportunity with World Cup to get soccer on the stage of the United States. I mean, honestly, it is a fantastic system because pretty much every single stadium, by and large, between the US and Canada, has some travel ability to it. Whether you're,
Sure.
whether you're here, whether you're in Seattle, whether you're in LA, you can see the players for, like I said, US men's national. You can see what they can bring to the table. You can see soccer's biggest sport within a decent driving distance, possibly flying if you're someplace like, say, Wyoming or something.
Right.
But the reality is you can get tremendous exposure. And what's happening right now, for example, with the US men's national team, there's a lot of draw being pulled in with this team, expectation and excitement that can carry over next year. If the team can do well in World Cup next year, that might be the kick that is necessary to get soccer more on the map than it is.
Oh,
Because,
without a doubt.
yeah.
Unfortunately, the the oh, I'm not going to say the success of the league, because I grew up at a time when, and this is what MLS has finally gotten past. MLS has finally gotten past the hump of, is this league gonna make it?
Mhm.
And there were so many different iterations for a number of years. Okay, so like Men in Blazers, they joke about, oh, it's America's sport of the future since 1972 or whatever the heck it is. And there's some truth to that because when I was a kid, oh, soccer's the next big thing, soccer's
Cosmos,
the
yeah.
next big thing, and still to a degree is an issue that people in the game haven't been able to solve,
Hmm.
which is how do I have such participation in this game at a youth level that does not translate into them being fans of the game when they get older?
Hmm.
If we have so many kids playing soccer when they're younger, why don't we have all those people who are huge soccer fans when they get older? What happens? Okay, and that's the same thing with the World Cup. I do think and again, the American sports fan in kind of in generalities loves big events. So the World Cup is a big event.
Hmm.
Then they want the US to be successful. So if the US can be successful on the international stage, the and it's a double-edged sword. Because for the women's national team, if they don't win the damn thing, well, what the heck happened? We
Hmm.
stink, you know, and as opposed to, well, you can't win all the time. I've always been a believer that we could really market the world championships of tiddlywinks if we can say that the three favorites in the world are three Americans, that people will
Hmm.
watch it and go, hey, Americans, we won. And that's part of it on the men's side. If the men can be really successful on the international level, then that draws people into the game, and then do they give it a chance? But the converse of that, and I always felt that because initially with the 94 World Cup, MLS was supposed to start, or the Division One league, which then became MLS, was supposed to start the next year.
Hmm.
Summer of '94 World Cup, '95 that league starts. Well, they don't start until 1996.
Yep.
And that might have been a blessing in disguise because the World Cup was that much further removed from the minds of sports fans. At the time, because the first year of MLS, you go back and watch it, there were some moments, it was okay, but it wasn't great football. Okay. And at that, so if they had started right away, I think you would have had some fans going, wait a minute, this isn't what I watched in the World
Hmm.
Cup. And there's very few leagues that are what you watch in the World Cup. You know, some of the big five, the big five in Europe, Champions League, that kind of thing, because some of those teams really are all-star teams of national teams. You know, a Man City, Liverpool, Bayern, you know, you look at that, they have the top players of four or five national teams kind of thing in their roster, where even the national team isn't as good because I got to fill the right back with somebody, and he's not as good as somebody else's right
If
back
you
who's
look at
good.
that Spain 2010 team, that was just Real Madrid and Barcelona put together. Yeah,
Right, right,
yeah.
and you see that in a lot of other countries too. You know,
Hmm.
you look at like a Costa Rica, and it's a little and it's a little different now because MLS has actually helped those Central American countries of finding places for their players to play where they know they're going to get paid and can make money and all that. But,
Yeah,
back in the day, it's whatever the big, Alajuelense, whatever the big clubs in that country were, that's primarily where the national team came from because that was the big club. Um,
absolutely.
but what we have now, and it would be interesting to see, does it help or hurt MLS if the U.S. does well in the World Cup and then people
Hmm.
sit back and go, well, wait a minute, none of those guys play in MLS.
Can I pose a question to you?
Sure.
You've had big interviews for big jobs, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
We had to show up and go talk to somebody and have them put eyes on you. If when you prepared yourself for that big interview, that big opportunity, right? Did you show up with your hair unkept or in a dirty shirt or unshowered, smelling badly,
Right.
just not
I
prepared for
hope
the
not.
moment? And so I know US success in the World Cup feels like it'll help the league, and I don't think it really will as much as we think it will because a lot of those guys don't even play in the MLS,
Right.
right? So if anything, it'll give those guys individual shine. It'll be a good way to increase Pulisic's platform and McKennie's platform, but I don't think it'll help the MLS so much. What I think would help in conjunction with that is if we change up the league a little bit.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of people are against promotion and relegation, but
News to
doing
me.
the yep, doing the league, doing the league in that way, and introducing that league model, um, so to speak, putting on a nice shirt when you get the opportunity, when the world's eyes are on you, right? And they look at you. How are they doing the sport there in America at this present moment? Oh, they don't even have relegation. Oh, they don't take the sport very seriously. So
Um,
then when you get the opportunity, we're not going to be taken very seriously.
okay, I've heard for years the promotion relegation argument. And
Hmm.
conceptually, I like the idea.
Hmm.
I worked at ESPN for better part of, over 10 years actually, doing soccer from all over the world except, and where you could see it all over the world except here in the US on their
Hmm.
international networks. One of the most exciting games I ever did. And we actually had to kind of fight with the powers that be. It was, you guys, you know Janusz Mihalik. So Janusz and I were doing the Eredivisie one season.
Hmm.
And we get
Hmm.
to the end of the season. At the time, it was a lot of PSV, Feyenoord, and Ajax. And
Hmm.
the top of the league was pretty much decided. PSV had won the title, whatever. And it slips my mind who the two teams were, but it was absolute relegation battle.
Hmm.
Two teams,
Hmm.
one above the line, one right below the line. Whoever wins stays up, whoever loses is relegated. And we were
Hmm.
like, this is the game we got to do. This is the game that and it was everything we sold it as. This is where everybody's going to, maximum effort, the passion you want, all of that was in that game. So from that standpoint, I like promotion relegation.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
let
But
me
It
ask you
adds
a
value to
question.
the
Let me
lower
ask
end
you a
game.
question. If you took England
Hmm.
with 92 teams, 92 professional teams between the Premier League and the Football League, and then all their
Hmm.
other pyramid system. If you took England and put it in the United States, how much geographical area does
Hmm.
it take up?
Oh, dude, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. That geographical area
No, but
increases by,
ballpark, what do you think it is?
oh, it probably is just New York State plus like the tri-state area at most.
Alabama.
Hmm.
Stop.
It is the state of Alabama. In fact, Alabama is more
Yeah.
rectangular. England
Hmm.
spread out a little bit. Alabama, I believe, has 500 more square miles than England.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So put
Yeah. That's
92
we spoke
teams,
about that.
but so here's the thing, put 92 teams into Alabama.
Alabama.
Hmm.
Now you need the
Hmm.
population of the UK in Alabama as
Hmm.
well. And you
Hmm.
know, Huntsville and Birmingham and Mobile all of a sudden
Hmm.
become these big cities.
Hmm.
Um, but when you look at that, and where I really thought about this, and was I was watching FA Cup years ago, and it was Arsenal
Hmm.
playing Sunderland, and Arsenal
Hmm.
beat the
Hmm.
crap out of them. It's like
Hmm.
5-0 in London. And the announcer says, "Oh, you have to feel for these Sunderland fans who woke up early this morning to make the drive to the capital." Sunderland's way the heck up by Scotland. And I thought, how many teams in our league
Yeah.
can you wake up early
Right.
and drive to the game?
Yeah.
There's only a handful of them.
Hmm.
And we'll take out, Hudson River Derby or El Trafico, though, two teams in the same
Right.
city. That's easy. But,
Right.
if you're in Minnesota,
Hmm.
there's only a couple teams you'd even think of. I can wake up early and drive to that game.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my problem with
Hmm.
promotion relegation. A couple different
Hmm.
things.
Hmm.
First off, our country's too big.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's pretty. Yeah. Yeah.
when you look
The
at
logistics of it
whether
is
we
just.
like it or not, and whether the Apple TV Plus deal and MLS Season Pass is the path forward long term, I'm not sure. That's a whole nother discussion. But when you look at a TV perspective, if, for example, um, Crystal Palace, we'll just pick Crystal. If Crystal Palace gets relegated in the Premier League, you
Mhm.
don't lose London as a television market.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
other teams in the market. There's very few, because of the size of England, there's very
Hmm.
few places where if a team gets relegated, you've lost that television market.
Right.
If Chicago gets relegated, you've lost the third largest media market in the country. And how do you replace that from fan interest, from media rights, from all of that, if you bring in, for example, Tulsa?
I
Hmm.
absolutely have a rebuttal
Okay.
Sure.
if you'd like to hear.
Now that's one.
Yeah.
There was an article years ago in the old Howler magazine talking with the guys
Hmm.
in Chattanooga, their NPSL team. And this was when the NASL was still going. And they said,
Yeah.
well, you're doing so great. You get like 11, 12, 13,000 a game. Why don't you look at moving into the USL or NASL? And they said, we thought about it, but we need another $4 million a year, we think, to make that work. And we've done focus groups and stuff with our fans, and they say they don't care what league we play in. They like the entertainment experience that they get going to watch that team, even though it's only NPSL. Because that's one of the other things too that I think the diehard fan misses out. For some people, I don't need my team to be in the top league and be a winner in the top league. It's a good entertainment outlet. So the problem you run into, so they say they need $4 million more. They said, one, they don't know if the business environment in Chattanooga could support that. Could they find enough sponsorship to get that money to make it
Hmm.
work? And then also, what happens to your 12 and 13,000 a game when your tickets go from $8 a
Hmm.
ticket to $40 a ticket? Okay,
Hmm.
because in some markets, for some of it, right or wrong, where we're at right now, do I take my kid and three of his friends for his birthday and go to this soccer game because they all play soccer and they want to watch, and we watch the game and we have a good time and we get hot dogs and sodas, whatever? Or do I take him to the movies?
Hmm.
Hmm.
For sometimes that's the decision on what I do with my disposable income.
Right.
Do I take my friend, my kid and his three friends to an MLS game where instead of dropping like 100, 120 bucks on tickets and concessions and all that, I have to spend like 400.
Mm.
So that's another thing because I'm a believer that so let's take Chicago before Joe Mansueto took over. Okay, the previous ownership group and they struggled some, but I'm a believer that in some markets, and I just use that as an example because it's such a big market. I don't know how many owners in MLS, right or wrong, because I said this to a friend of mine from England, and his response was they should all be dragged out back and shot, which might be extreme. But my argument was how many owners, if you get relegated, do you go into do you do something with USL? And so it's USL champion, whatever the case may be. But whatever that second division league is, you get relegated down to there. How many of
Hmm.
those owners go, you know what? Let's pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Let's fight. Let's get back into MLS. Or does that owner say, you know what? I've lost millions already. I'm done. And
Mm.
they roll
They
up
were
the
never
carpet
co-
and that
they were
team
never committed
vanishes.
to begin with, Joe. They were never committed to begin with. Then it exposes someone who is in it for the money. Like
A
that's the
lot of
difference
owners already
between the
are in it for the
game.
money.
Okay.
That's the difference. That's the difference between the passion. Hold on one sec.
Well,
That's the difference
absolutely.
between the
But
passion of the game
it's
here versus in England.
professional sports. It's
Sure,
professional sports. And for
but
people, no, but
there's
for
an
people
element.
who get upset because the owners say it's always about the money.
Yeah,
Part
but
of it's
there's an
always
element,
about the
there's an
money.
element about it that's way more about a love for the game and putting on a good show for your supporters, the people who show up and put the bus in seats. And if that makes an owner run away, if a little bit of turbulence in the team's
Again,
success
for you and me, it's
makes an
not
owner
our
run
money.
away.
So how much is a little bit of turbulence? How much is I've already lost
Hmm.
$50 million in MLS over the last 10 years. And now I'm going to go
Yeah,
from getting 15,000 a game to three
Hmm.
yeah.
because I'm not in MLS anymore.
Not every owner
Or
Conversations.
seeks
even
more
if I
money.
get
Yeah.
10,000, I've gone from making 30, 40, $50 a ticket to making 10, 15, $20 a ticket.
Hmm.
And now instead
Conversations
of
like
losing
this.
$5 million this year, I lose $10 million. At some point, even if you're a rich guy, at some point enough I've lost enough. Enough is enough.
Absolutely.
And you
Hmm.
see it in
They have every
every
right.
industry.
They have every right.
You see it in every industry.
Conversations,
I have a
conversations like
chain of
this.
tire stores, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, our
That's
competitors
it.
doing better. We're not making enough money. I go bankrupt. I shut it down, and that's the equivalent here.
Conversations. If you would,
Wrexham is a good example. It's you love them or hate them.
right.
But if the Wrexham fan trust that owned the team before Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney came in,
Hmm.
with such a great passion and all that, why did you need them to come in and bail you out?
Hmm.
Right.
Because at some point you got to make some money.
Yeah. Conversations like this illuminate to me that you mentioned an arrogance earlier about how the NBA, the NFL, like if you want to compete at the highest level, you come here and you do it. And I agree with that. But that arrogance, I think, bleeds over into how we participate in the world sport. And the I understand you're right about the logistics of the geography of it. Like it's just such a huge country. How do teams consistently compete against each other? How does a team get relegated and still compete and travel and afford to do all that stuff?
Right.
And millionaires losing all that money and all that stuff, the poor millionaires. Um, but conversations like this illuminate to me that it's just not ready yet. Like
Hmm.
we can't implement um, promotion and relegation now, not even in the next 2 to 3, 5 years.
Okay, so let me
Um,
ask you this. Let me ask
but
you
it
this.
but for me, it's an
I'm
inevitability.
just sitting on the
Because
For
sidelines
me,
well, no,
it's an
watching
because
it happen.
again, I
inevitability.
like the idea of promotion
Hmm.
relegation. But if promotion relegation is the linchpin for
Hmm.
MLS to be successful,
Hmm.
why is the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NHL, and the NBA successful without promotion and relegation?
Because those are specifically American sports. And it's we're not we created the business model for how those sports are how competition works for those sports, right? But we didn't create the business model for how it's kind of like us saying Italian food here is the best Italian food. It's just not, right? Like we it's the American version of Italian food, and we can appreciate it for it being
Sure.
a unique part of American cuisine. But when if you try to make the claim that no, that's the way Italian food should be done, you're wrong, right? It's a derivative of the real Italian food. It's the same thing. Like we can if we want to do it the way we're doing it, fine, but we can't expect it to go above a certain level. We can't expect it to make us above a certain amount of money. We can't expect to attract us a certain amount of talent. It'll always be a poachers league. It'll always be a selling league. And if that's the lane we want to be in, then that's cool. But if we have higher aspirations for this league, then we need to cook Italian food the way Italians cook it.
I would argue that the more important thing is, can you get the league to a level? And I don't
Hmm.
know that a corporate sponsor goes, you know what? Now that I know that a team from, Greensboro, North Carolina, or Greenville, South the Greenville Triumph. Now that I know
Kick
the
the ball from
Greenville Triumph have an opportunity to play in MLS, now I'm going to sponsor the league. Now I'm going to get
Yeah,
behind
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
my local team. Okay, so really, what we're talking about with it being a selling league is getting enough interest. Okay, in most countries around the world, what is the light at the end of the tunnel for a kid trying to get out of a challenging socioeconomic situation
Hmm.
from a sports perspective?
Hmm.
Can they play this game? A lot of
Hmm.
places around the world, the game and the sport that in essence gets you out of the ghetto is football, soccer,
Hmm.
in a lot of
Sure.
countries around the world. That's not the case
Yeah,
in our
Ronaldo had no boots. He couldn't afford boots. He had to play
right.
barefoot. Yeah.
What's that sport in this country? Probably
That sport is like
I would
basketball,
say basketball.
basketball.
Yeah.
NFL.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
from many different things. Okay, take the amount of space you need for a field in our game in soccer, right? I need this
Hmm.
much space for a soccer field. You know how many
Yeah.
basketball courts I can fit in there?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
17.
Yeah.
Okay. So do I take the real estate that I have in an inner city or somewhere, and do I build a facility that lets me take 22 kids off the street and play and give them an opportunity here? Or do I build a facility where I take 170 kids?
Hmm.
Because I have 17 basketball courts with 5 players on each team, as opposed to one soccer field with 11 players on each team. So some of that is economically driven as well. So to me, for this league to stop being a selling league, the challenge they have to be is, can they garner more fan attention than, to start with, the NHL and then
Hmm.
baseball and basketball?
How do they do that, you think?
Because the one issue I have with any league, except maybe the Premier League, but most leagues around the world, the moment they go,
Hmm.
we're going to try this because that's what the NFL does. The
Right.
NFL is its own sacred animal.
Hmm.
Okay, I've felt for years that a big problem Major League Soccer has is you have people who are fans of their teams in this league. New York City fan. I am a fan of New York City. I am a fan
Yeah.
of Austin FC. I am a fan of
Yeah.
the Seattle Sounders. When Columbus plays Colorado, I don't care.
Hmm.
Right.
There are not a lot of people who are fans of teams in this league who are fans of the league
The
in
sport.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Whereas, how many people are like, what are you doing tonight? I'm watching football games, Thursday night football.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Who's playing? I don't know. It's football. You know, we're not at that point. And it's part of what drove the MLS season pass deal is we put a national game of the week on either ESPN or Fox, and we don't get great numbers. We get decent number in those two cities, but not everywhere else.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's, again, I wish I had an answer to that. If I had, I'd probably be a high-ranking executive in this league. Of how do we get people to be fans of the league? How do I get the New York City fan to say, you know what? When LAFC plays Minnesota, I'm still going to watch it.
Hmm.
I feel like we were doing it right maybe in the early 2000s, is like we were kind of going in that direction. For me, the right business model is right now we're facing outward, as in even looking at New York City FC, we constantly bring in South American talent and just foreign talent, foreign born talent, right?
Sure.
Which is cool. I want to see as much diverse talent in the league as possible, but it doesn't feel like there's a real pathway for good, talented American players to really, unless they come up in the academy, to really be seen and then selected by these teams
Right.
to
Well,
and given a
but
platform.
that's
You
the
know,
case everywhere. That's the case everywhere. But the difference is,
in Italy,
no,
though,
no. But
no.
here's the difference. Okay. And again, I'll just go to this because people know about it because they're watching the documentary. But even look at Wrexham. Okay. I hate to go back to that, but look at Welcome to Wrexham. One of their big storylines in this season was what they're doing with their academy.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Here's a team that a couple of years ago was trying to get out of the National League. Okay.
Hmm.
So you look around England, you look around Germany, you look around Italy, even these small little teams that are in League Two or in the National League, whatever, a lot of those teams have academies. Now,
Hmm.
part of it is the business model. If I can bring this kid up through my academy and all of a sudden a team two, three, four levels up says, "Ooh, look at that guy,"
The
and I
ROI
can
is
sell
crazy.
him for 500,000,
Yeah,
000,
yeah, the
I now
ROI is
cover
crazy.
my operating budget for the year.
Yeah, yeah,
So, and that's part of what it is now with MLS.
yeah, for
I've
sure.
argued that there's some teams in this league that, and Dallas comes to mind for me, where
Yeah.
and they may come out and go, you know what, you're out of your mind, you're absolutely wrong. I take great offense that you say this. But
Hmm.
there's times that I think the ownership group in Dallas that winning MLS Cup is secondary.
Hmm.
If it happens, great. But if we can keep churning out players out of our academy that we can turn around and sell for $2 and $3 and $4 million, that's how we get our return of investment from being in this league. Okay, look what Philadelphia's done. And that's another one that people try and wrap their heads around when we talk about Americans want our stuff has to be the best.
Aren't they
Okay.
being realists though? They're being a selling team in a selling league, in a league where if you don't do
Well,
well,
no,
there's
but
no
sure,
threat.
but like look
There's
at
no threat,
Philadelphia. Is there an
so they don't have to
NFL
win the
team?
cup.
No, but is there an NFL team, an NBA team, whatever, that if you had an academy like that and you brought up a star like a Paxton Aronson,
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden you go, yeah, we're selling him to that team over in Europe,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
where fans in other leagues, what are you doing that for? He's a great player. This is the best league in the world. Where we're in a situation as fans of MLS and fans of our teams in MLS, I have to go, that's just the way it is right now. And again, one of the what a lot of people following this league and a lot of media covering this league felt was a watershed moment was the MLS All-Star game in Seattle, which in his State of the League address might have been the first time that Don Garber admitted we're a selling league.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
And in some respects, there's nothing wrong with that. This is where we are in the landscape.
yeah,
So if that's where you are, how do you maximize your place in the overall landscape? What do we do? And that's part of, like you said, New York City, going out and finding these. Part of that, let me go out and find a player in South America because I might be able to find a diamond in the rough
hmm
where I don't have to pay a lot to get him. He
hmm
comes here, he gets exposure. I mean, I will
hmm
say with MLS Season Pass, the great advantage for the players is it is available worldwide.
Hmm.
Right,
I'm a
right, right,
scout
right,
on
right.
any team anywhere in the world, and somebody goes, "Hey, have you heard about this guy
This
playing in
kid,
New
oh
York
yeah, yeah,
City?" I can
yeah.
watch him.
Hmm.
I can watch the last 15 games he's played
Hmm.
and get an
Yeah.
idea, body of work of what this kid can do. Hey, they got this kid they just brought in this year, Johnny Shore. You should take a look at him. So that's a great tool for agents and players to try and better themselves. So there is that. So, but at the same point, is there anything wrong if you can, where's your priority lie? And I do think there are teams out there who do want to try and do both. Let me bring in guys, bring them up, get them to play. Let me supplement them with the Messi or the Bernadeschi, the Insigne, whatever, and see if we can put together a winning team.
But it feels like in a league like this, you rarely can you do both. Like the teams that are win now teams like LAFC,
Right.
are they world renowned for their academy? Are they known league wide for their academy? Not necessarily, right? They're known for simply buying talent and winning now this season.
Sure.
And I wanted to ask you, you were describing Dallas's model. Were you, is that something you're okay with? Is that something you like? I couldn't really
Hmm.
tell. Like,
No, it is what it is. Yeah, it's like you said, there are some teams out there who their focus, I believe, their focus is on the academy. Who can we bring up? Who can we sign to a home, especially now that they changed the roster rules? Who
right,
can I sign to a homegrown contract that when I sell that player, I get the lion's share of that money? For years,
right.
if you sold an academy player, it was a 50-50 split between the team and the league. So why should I really invest resources to build up my academy if in essence the league is going to come in and go, hey, we're all one big happy family, we get part of that money? Well, you didn't do anything
Mhm.
in a sense from an
Yeah,
academy level
Hmm.
to help us develop that guy. Now
yeah.
the league will, well, sure we did. We're all part of a league, and you have these games, and that's why you have money coming in, and that's why there's an avenue. That's why this player wants to be in your academy because the light at the end of the tunnel is the opportunity to play on the professional level. So where do you draw that balance? And I think they did a little better with that in the recent agreements where teams get more money for selling their homegrown players. Okay, but
Okay.
now there's that motivation to try and develop players. Now, what's
Hmm.
part of that motivation? Well, part of that motivation, I think, is we need to get more young players, and I think it's part of it too. Is can we get more interest in a league if if teenagers coming up go, I have an opportunity here, and maybe I'm a little altruistic on this thought of do you kind of get a grassroots effort of there's all these my friend is playing in this academy so now I want to see what he's doing and now I want to follow that team and it kind of does that kind of grow across the land. um
Can I
but
piggyback
it
really quick
also
something you mentioned earlier?
well no, but it
Like
also
you,
in a salary cap situation I've now brought up a
oh,
bunch of homegrown guys that if they can
mhm.
perform above expectation of what they're paying them as a player out of the academy, I now have that guy I'm paying 60, 70, $80,000, and he's playing like a guy I'm paying $300,000. I mean, you talk about you can't do both. To me, that was one of the magical things about winning MLS Cup in 2021
Hmm.
is you had guys who came into this team and developed it. Tati Castellanos, primary, who developed Alexander Collins comes in and develops in this system,
Hmm.
and you win a championship. And now that's in part why they're elsewhere
Hmm.
because teams saw
Yeah,
what
yeah,
they
yeah.
did, how
Mhm.
successful they were, and that's a player I want to get.
But we can't end the story there because look, you saw what happened because it's a selling league and it's a selling team. We sold off everything but the kitchen sink, and now look at the dire straits that the team has found itself in, right? So I just feel like there has to be some sort of balance. That like we go extreme one direction, extreme in the other direction. There has to be some sort of cruising altitude that we can exist at as a league, where we
Sure,
can have teams that win now, have teams that develop talent, right? And uh, have teams that then sell players for profit, right? And still look like themselves.
Hmm.
Because I think a
so
fan
quite
does not want
so
to show up for a team. Like if you look at our attendance lately, no fans want to show up for a team. We won the league just a couple years ago. No fans want to show up for a team that is has these extreme highs and then these extreme lows just a year or two later. They don't want to do that. They like to know what they can expect from the team, you know?
sure,
And
but
being this,
how do you solve that? Do you want how much free will, if you like, do you want teams to have?
as much as they
Okay, I
can,
want to
but
be able to run my club the way I want to run
yeah,
my club,
yeah.
or Or, and this is, there's people out there now saying, if the league wants to take that next step up and be more competitive on the world stage and be one of those leagues that people look at, you have to raise the spending limits. You have to let teams
No, for
spend
sure.
more money.
100%.
But
100%.
from a player perspective and all, yeah, we're instead of a salary cap of $4, $5, $6 million, whatever it is,
Right.
we're going to go to
Right.
$12 million.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
then you also have to have a floor. And that can be a little tricky at times too. The
Yeah.
NHL has a salary cap and a salary floor. And
Mm.
it ended up working 10, 15 years later, but at the time it was a guy
Mm.
who was the GM in Florida. And he said, "Look, we're not good right now. We have to rebuild. I got to strip it down and I have to rebuild. But because of
Mhm.
the salary floor, I'm going to have to overpay a player
Mhm.
because I have to hit that floor. So
Yeah.
I'm going to have to give a player a contract that I normally wouldn't because I got to hit a number."
It's league requirements.
His concern was because they have arbitration in that league, is now another player is going to be in a contract dispute. They're going to get in front of an arbitrator and go, "Well, look what they're paying that guy in Florida, and I'm better than him." And how often did the arbitrator go, "Well, yeah, but the only reason he's getting that is to meet a number." So what he ended up doing was trading for a veteran defenseman who can provide leadership and is good in the
Mhm.
room and all that stuff, but also had a big salary number because I got to hit a number, and you solve it that way. So in this case, do you want the league to say, okay, not only are we going to restrict how much you can spend, because I think what the league wants to avoid, you go back to the old NASL, they went from 12 teams to 24 teams in like 3, 4 years. And part of it was if you had $1 million for the expansion fee, you got a team. And a lot of people looked in and go, "Well, look at what's happened. Like, look what the Cosmos are doing. They get
Mhm.
50. Well, when the Cosmos came to town, they sold out their stadium. The rest of the season, not so much." And
Mhm.
the other mistake I think that league officials made there, you had the $1 million expansion fee, but did you have any other money to keep the team running? And I think a lot of these owners were like, "We'll pay the $1 million and we'll just start printing money because all these people are going to come and watch it, and that's how we're going to pay for everything." And then the realization was they didn't have the money to keep the team afloat. And all
Mhm.
of a sudden you went from 12 teams to 24 back to 12. And the rest of the country and the people involved in sports and the media and all that see soccer doesn't work in America.
I
With
got to
all these
cut this
teams that
short. I
just
wish I
fold.
didn't. I
So
wish I could keep going, but
right. So
uh,
but so
It's
you
a.
have to find that balance of
Mhm.
what is our salary cap? Do we have a floor to keep that competitiveness? Because
Mhm.
I think they want parity. And
Right.
from a business standpoint, and this is going to be really unpopular, I
Mhm.
think most owners in other leagues around the world, Premier League especially, if you went to them today and said, "We're going to have a vote, we need 3/4 to approve it. And if you vote for this, we're going to get rid of promotion relegation," I think
hmm,
they'd do it in a heartbeat
hmm,
because it's a business. It's
yes.
back to what you said, Alan, about, it's about the money. It's professional sports. As Giorgio Canaglia told
That's
me
a
one
that's
time,
a
it's
take, bro.
always
That's a
about the money,
take.
you morons.
That's a
That was
take.
Giorgio Canaglia. It's always about the money.
Yep.
So
That's a
for those
take, man.
teams to protect my stake, my investment in
Mhm.
this, if I can keep everybody else out, I'm all in.
Oof.
For
That's
every
a
Steve
take.
Cohen out there, there's 100 that aren't. So, but dude, I appreciate this. I'm sorry. I'd love to continue this. I wish I could. But we can't. Are you down to do this again and keep this going?
Sure.
Absolutely. I'd love to be able to do
Yeah.
that if we can. Um, Real
And
quick, last
Bernadeschi and Insigne were simple. They're paying them a fortune and they're not getting the money out of it.
that's going to screw them for Thursday, though.
So,
But
or will it?
well, Bernadeschi was the leading goal scorer slash assist.
Bernadeschi,
But
yes. Insigne, I don't know.
yeah,
But at some point, you pay those millions of dollars.
yep.
You got to have that performance. And from I was up in Toronto a bunch last year doing Apple TV. This part. Okay, example,
A little
US
bit more
Open Cup.
dimension.
Everyone wants US Open Cup to be like the FA Cup. The
Right.
FA
Yeah.
Cup is as successful as it is right now, plain and simple, because of the
Yeah.
money involved.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Okay. And US soccer has changed a little bit about how they're funding stuff. But
Hmm.
before they made those changes, a conference team making it into the third round proper. So that's the level of the FA Cup where the Premier League teams come in. If you
Hmm.
were to advance through the preliminary rounds and then the first and second round proper, get to third round proper when the Premier League comes in, you made like triple the money of what the winner of the US Open Cup got in a season. That's how
Hmm.
much money's in the FA Cup. So I was doing
Right.
some NASL games when the Cosmos were playing out on Long Island. And Colin
Hmm.
Clark was the coach of Carolina. And the Cosmos were playing Carolina. We go to the hotel that morning to meet with Colin Clark, talk about the game, whatever. And they had just finished US Open Cup, and they were the NASL team that went the furthest in the competition. And at the
Hmm.
time, for NASL, USL, whatever, whoever in your league went the furthest in the competition, you got a $15,000 bonus.
Hmm.
I said, hey, congrats, what you guys did in the Open Cup, and you get the bonus money and all. And didn't even crack a smile. He went, yeah, it didn't cover the travel cost to LA.
Hmm.
There was a team, I forget the team, there was a team in Colorado, an amateur team, that made one of these Cinderella runs in the US Open Cup. And
Hmm.
everyone's, oh, look at this. It's like, it's great. They're giant killers, whatever. They didn't
Right.
enter the tournament the next season.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And people go, well, you had this great run. And the owner goes, right. And I put most of it on my credit cards. And if we do it again, I'm going to go bankrupt.
Do you
Bankrupt. Yeah.
do you remember the Alliance of
So I
American
can't risk
Football?
it.
Do you remember the AAF back in 2017 or 18, whatever it was, that football league precursor to XFL2?
Yeah.
That league folded mid-season, and all the players, wherever they were, had to get back home on their own dime because there was no money for travel. Now, if you
Dude.
played for San Diego and you live in Massachusetts, you had to get yourself back to Massachusetts on your own dime. But
So
last question on this one: social media, do you have it? Any way people can get in contact with you? Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, what, X, Twitter, whatever. I think it's just at Joe Tolleson, and then Instagram, and I'll have to double check because it's one of those like I don't know my phone number
I'll check
because I
that
don't
in
call
post.
myself all the time. I believe it's at Joe Tolleson underscore NYC.
My internet connection is terrible. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay,
You're
no,
fine.
mine is Joe underscore Tolleson underscore NYC. That's
Okay.
the
I
Instagram.
was going to try and look that up.
But I think if you put if you search Joe Tolleson, hopefully I come up. My
Probably from the
That's a
soccer
unique name.
perspective.
my
Unique
ugly
enough name.
mug's
It'll
on the
come up.
profile picture, so it's easy to
But
find.
seriously, Joe, I appreciate the time on this. Like I said, I'd love to continue this if we could. So,
Sure.
but anyway, yeah, appreciate it. Take care. Again, Scott Schertzen, Halen Haru as well. Stream Punk Soccer, Stream Punk Entertainment, and as always, chatting with awesome people. Like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff because we do this stuff pretty friggin' often over here for soccer fans. So, anyway, till next time, thanks and stay awesome.